Behind the glamour, behind the red carpets, behind the award speeches, there were contracts. Contracts soaked in control, silence, and fear. What if I told you that some of Hollywood's brightest stars weren't allowed to fall in love, grow old, or even be honest about who they truly were, not because they didn't want to, but because a studio contract forbade it? At the peak of Hollywood's golden age, being a star wasn't just about talent or charisma. It was about obedience. Every smile, every marriage, every headline curated by studios who played God with people's lives. You've seen them on screen, confident, powerful, adored. But what you didn't see were the clauses buried deep in their contracts, the ones that banned marriage, demanded lies about their age, concealed illnesses, and silenced their true identities. These weren't just job agreements, they were cages wrapped in golden paper. And the price of disobedience? Career death? Think you know your favorite legends? Think again. Which contract clause do you think was the cruelest? Comment below. But first, let's open the velvet curtain and expose what it truly meant to be a star in old Hollywood. Hudson, Bette Davis, and the legal war for autonomy. Bette Davis was never afraid of a fight, and in 1936, she did something no actress had dared. She sued Warner Brothers. She was tired of the roles they gave her, tired of being dressed in feathers and frills, while her male co-stars got complexity and grit. Her contract, like all others, demanded obedience. But Davis demanded dignity. When she refused roles, they suspended her. When she protested, they threatened to blacklist her. So she crossed the Atlantic and sued the studio in British court, knowing full well it could destroy her. She lost the case, but she won the war. Hollywood had never seen such defiance, and the pressure her lawsuit created slowly cracked the studio system's grip. Years later, the same studios that punished her would beg her to return, this time on her term. Bette Davis didn't just play strong women. She became one, and in doing so, she opened a door for generations of stars to demand more than just applause. They demanded control. #2. Dorothy Dandridge and the racial clause that wasn't written. Dorothy Dandridge made history as the first black woman nominated for a Best Actress Oscar. She was beauty, talent, and grace, but she wasn't free. Her contract wasn't as explicit as others. It didn't ban her from love or force her into silence, but it denied her the roles her talent deserved, and that, too, is a form of censorship. Studios refused to cast her opposite white male leads. She was told not to be seen in public with white actors offset. Any interracial implication could be fatal not to the project, but to her career. When she dated white director Otto Preminger, rumors swirled, doors closed. The Academy gave her a nomination and then gave her nothing. Her beauty was commodified, her voice was praised, but her power? Denied. Sometimes the cruelest clauses are the ones that don't exist but are still enforced. #3. Charles Laughton and the erased identity. Charles Laughton was a towering presence, a Shakespearean powerhouse with a voice that could shake a theater. He won an Oscar. He married Elsa Lanchester. He was respected, revered, untouchable, but no one ever truly knew him. Laughton was gay or bisexual, but no interview, no studio memo, no public admission ever confirmed it. Not because he denied it, but because the system didn't allow it to exist. His contract with RKO included a morals clause. Like so many others, which served as a leash, the mere threat of scandal was enough to end a career. So Laughton and Lanchester entered into an unspoken agreement. Marriage's shield. Affection without full truth. Behind the curtains, he lived a life of compartmentalization, not necessarily shame, but restriction. He built his legacy in full view, while his truth was kept in shadows by obligation. What kind of legacy is built when part of you must remain buried? For Laughton, the answer was brilliant, but incomplete. #4. Olivia de Havilland and the studio sentence. She was graceful, poised, and quietly rebellious. In the 1,930 seconds and 40 seconds, Olivia de Havilland was bound by the same system as everyone else, one that treated stars like property. Her Warner Brothers contract claimed she owed the studio 7 years, but those 7 years didn't count if she turned down a role, even for health or ethics. So, the studio punished her, suspended her, delayed her contract again and again. By the time her 7 years ended, she had already given them nearly a decade. De Havilland fought back and won. She took Warner Brothers to court and shattered the system from within. The result was the landmark de Havilland Law, which limited studio contracts to a true 7-year maximum. Her courage freed generations of actors after her, but it came at a cost: years of blacklisting, isolation, and lost roles. When obedience is expected, resistance becomes revolution. And in Hollywood, revolution doesn't come without scars. 5. William Haynes and the Price of Defiance. In the late 1920s, William Haynes was a top box office draw, charming, confident, openly gay among his inner circle. But when MGM demanded he enter a sham marriage to protect his image, he refused. It was unheard of. Stars didn't push back, but Haynes did. Studio head Louis B. Mayer gave him an ultimatum: fake it or vanish. Haynes chose love. He walked away from the screen and into obscurity. His contract was terminated, his name scrubbed from marquee lists. The media offered no coverage. In Hollywood's eyes, he was erased. But in truth, he survived. Haynes went on to become a successful interior designer, staying with his partner Jimmy Shields for nearly 50 years. He paid a price, but on his own term. How rare is courage in an industry built on illusion? For William Haynes, authenticity meant exile and liberation. 6. Marilyn Monroe and the Clauses of Control. She was the ultimate icon, blonde, breathy, beloved. But Marilyn Monroe's life was not her own. Her contracts, first with 20th Century Fox, later with independent producers, came laced with invisible chains. Monroe had no say in her roles. The studio dictated what she wore, how she walked, what she weighed, and even how she laughed. There were clauses that required public compliance and penalties for any behavior deemed unbecoming of a Fox star. When she pushed back, requesting better roles, deeper characters, she was labeled difficult, punished, benched. Even her image was legally weaponized. After her death, Fox continued to license her likeness for decades. In essence, Marilyn Monroe never stopped working, not even in death. She famously once said, "Hollywood is a place where they'll pay you $1,000 for a kiss and 50 cents for your soul." Turns out, she was underselling it. Was Marilyn ever free, or was she just the most glamorous prisoner in cinema history? 7. Tony Perkins and the Split Life Clause. Best known as Norman Bates in Psycho, Tony Perkins played fragile, haunted men characters torn between two selves. Off-screen, he lived the same fracture. Perkins was gay, and his studio knew it. His contract came with all the usual morality restrictions, but his handlers went further, managing his wardrobe, arranging female dates, even coaching him on heterosexual behavior during interviews. He had to split himself in two. In public, he dated actresses. In private, he wrote love letters he never mailed. Every role he played came with the added performance of being safe, not just to audiences, but to sponsors, studio bosses, and gossip columns hungry for ruin. When he briefly married in later life, some said it was love. Others called it strategy. He died of AIDS-related complications in 1992, a fact the media tiptoed around. Even in death, his truth remained a contract-sensitive subject. When the cameras stopped rolling, who gets to be real? For Tony Perkins, the answer was, maybe no one. Loretta Young and the Hidden Child. Loretta Young was America's sweetheart, elegant, devout, untouchable. But behind her image was a secret she never fully owned. A child, born out of wedlock, fathered by Clark Gable, and hidden from the world. When Young became pregnant during the filming of Call of the Wild in 1935, there was no clause protecting her privacy. Only ones that threatened her career if scandal emerged. Unwed motherhood could mean termination, blacklisting, or worse, exile from the studio system. So, she disappeared, gave birth in secret, placed the child in an orphanage, then staged a highly publicized adoption 2 years later, all to preserve an image manufactured and enforced by contract. Her daughter, Judy Lewis, didn't learn the truth until decades later. Even then, Young struggled to reconcile her faith with what she had done and what she had been forced to do. How far must a star go to preserve a lie they didn't write? For Loretta, the answer was, as far as motherhood itself. 9. Montgomery Clift and the Clause of Silence. Montgomery Clift was magnetic, a new kind of leading man, tortured, intelligent, emotionally raw. He reshaped masculinity on screen, but off-screen, he was drowning in a contract that demanded one thing above all: utter silence. Clift was bisexual, and more crucially, unmanageable. Studios loved his talent but feared his instability. His contract at Paramount included behavioral stipulations, requiring that he maintain an acceptable public image, a euphemism for discretion, denial, and isolation. After a devastating car crash in 1956, Clift's appearance changed. So did his emotional state. But instead of care, the studio doubled down. Photo approvals, lighting demands, publicity control. They even requested re-editing footage to minimize damage to his image. No rehab, no empathy, just damage control. He became a prisoner of his own myth, expected to look the same, feel the same, act the same, all while silently unraveling. When a contract demands perfection, what happens when your body breaks, but the illusion must live on? For Clift, the answer was slow, painful erasure. Hudson 0, Rita Hayworth and the Contracted Identity. Rita Hayworth was born Margarita Cancino, a Spanish-Irish dancer with dark hair, a broad hairline, and a natural accent. But Columbia Pictures had other plans. They rewrote her. Her contract required a total transformation. Electrolysis to raise her hairline, hours of dyeing to achieve the now iconic red, and intense diction training to erase any trace of her heritage. She became Rita Hayworth, the American dream, created in a lab of lights, lenses, and legal obligations. But the reinvention came at a cost. Hayworth once famously said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." Her own identity became unrecognizable, even to herself. The woman who danced flamenco with her father was gone. In her place stood a symbol, crafted not by art, but by contract. And when the fantasy faded, when roles dwindled and youth slipped away, the studio didn't offer her the dignity of truth, just silence. If a contract can rewrite your name, your body, your history, is there anything left that belongs to you? Hudson, Sal Mineo, and the studio muzzle. Sal Mineo wasn't just a promising actor. After Rebel Without a Cause, he became a symbol of youthful rebellion, intense, sensitive, unpredictable. But Mineo's real life strayed too far from the studio-approved narrative. He was gay, and unlike others, he didn't hide well. In the early 1960 seconds, whispers turned to headlines. Mineo's studio contract included vague clauses about moral conduct, but those words held power. The minute gossip columns connected his name with underground parties or unconventional relationships, offers began to dry up. Behind the scenes, the studio issued warnings. Stay invisible, keep it quiet. Roles once promised suddenly disappeared. His sexuality wasn't the only reason his career stalled, but it was the lever pulled when his image no longer aligned with public fantasy. The muzzle wasn't written in bold letters. It was enforced through silence and starvation. Was the punishment worse for those who couldn't perform the lie convincingly enough? Mineo's career never recovered, but the contract never said why. Hudson 2, Jean Harlow, and the Marriage Ban. Jean Harlow was Hollywood's first platinum blonde, a sex symbol before the term even existed. But behind the sultry persona and studio-fueled stardom was a deeply invasive clause in her contract. She couldn't get married without MGM's approval. Why? Because married sex symbols didn't sell. In the 1930 seconds, fan magazines built careers by selling fantasy. And the studios? They sold access to those fantasies. Harlow, known for her bombshell image, became a commodity too valuable to belong to anyone, even in real life. So when she fell in love with William Powell, the studio refused to let her Wednesday publicly. They were close friends. Privately, they were engaged. But without MGM's blessing, there would be no ring, no ceremony, no future. Her career surged, her heart broke. And when Harlow died suddenly at age 26, the man she had loved, forbidden by contract to marry her, stood at her funeral, powerless. When does image management become emotional imprisonment? And how many Hollywood romances died quietly in the shadows of fine print? Hudson 3, Tab Hunter and the Studio Closet. He was the clean-cut, all-American heartthrob, blonde, blue-eyed, and box office gold. Tab Hunter seemed to have it all. But behind the dreamy smile lay a reality no fan magazines would ever print. Hunter was gay and under contract. Warner Brothers saw his orientation not as part of his identity, but as a PR threat. His contract came with morality clauses that could be interpreted broadly and dangerously. Any immoral behavior was grounds for termination. And in 1950 seconds Hollywood, being gay was considered just that. To keep the illusion intact, the studio fabricated public romances, including with Natalie Wood, while simultaneously issuing denials to gossip columns. But they weren't just protecting profits. They were enforcing silence through fear. In 1955, a tabloid caught wind of a police raid from Hunter's past. The studio moved fast: legal threats, hush money, and controlled statements. The message was clear: be who we say you are or disappear. Tab Hunter survived the system, barely. Decades later, he told his story. But for most of his career, he acted in two worlds, one on screen and one scripted by lawyers and fear. How many leading men lived entire lives hiding from their own contracts? And how many more never had the chance to speak? Hudson 4, Judy Garland and the Weight Clause. She was the darling of MGM, the voice behind Over the Rainbow, the fragile yet luminous star of The Wizard of Oz. But Judy Garland's contract didn't just own her schedule or her image, it owned her body. At just 16, Garland was placed under a brutal weight clause. Executives deemed her face too round and her body too plump for stardom. The solution? Pills, amphetamines to keep her thin, barbiturates to make her sleep, and constant surveillance. Studio dietitians controlled her meals. Cigarettes replaced snacks. Hunger became part of the job. Any deviation meant reprimand. If she gained weight, production halted. If she showed signs of fatigue, the studio doubled down on the treatment. Her life became a carefully calibrated performance, even off-screen. The tragedy wasn't just the drugs or the damage. It was the normalization of cruelty. MGM didn't hide their tactics, they institutionalized them. Garland wasn't unique. She was simply the most visible casualty of a system that prized perfection over personhood. What happens when an industry punishes natural growth and rewards self-destruction? For Judy, the cost was everything, and it was signed away in ink. Hasson 5. Rock Hudson and the Forbidden Truth. On screen, Rock Hudson was the embodiment of masculine allure, square-jawed, broad-shouldered, and impossibly charming. He played heartthrobs, war heroes, and romantic leads. But behind closed doors, he lived a lie written not by choice, but by contract. Universal Studios had one condition when shaping Hudson's rise. His truth could never be part of the package. In an era when homosexuality was considered both scandalous and criminal, Hudson's real life was viewed as a threat to the studio's bottom line. His contract included strict morality clauses, and while they never explicitly stated "don't be gay," they didn't need to. Everyone understood the code. Studio handlers orchestrated public relationships, even arranging a lavender marriage in 1955 to dissuade growing rumors. It wasn't love, it was strategy. Paparazzi were tipped off to stage dates, while behind the scenes, Hudson was shadowed by threats of tabloid exposure and career collapse. He wasn't alone, but he became the face of a cruel irony, a man forced to perform not just in front of a camera, but within his own life. Was Hollywood preserving an image or enforcing a prison sentence? And in the end, who paid the higher price? The studio, or the man who never got to be himself? Hollywood's golden age shimmered with elegance, but beneath the glow were chains. Contracts didn't just manage time, they managed truth. They dictated love, identity, silence. Some stars submitted, some vanished. A rare few fought back, but all of them paid. These weren't just documents, they were weapons, and in their shadows, entire lives were rewritten not by scriptwriters, but by lawyers in dark offices. So now we ask you, were these stars victims of the system or complicit in sustaining it? Did fame justify the silence? Or was the silence the real price of fame? Leave your thoughts below. And if this glimpse behind the velvet curtain shook your view of Hollywood, subscribe, share, and stay tuned. There's always another contract, another clause, another truth buried in glamour.